The aftermath and realization, the alien fleet slowly retreated, their ships moving in eerie silence. The vast, dark void of space surrounded them as they distanced themselves from the human warship. For the first time in centuries, the aliens felt a sense of unease that they could not explain. They had fought in countless battles against species far stronger and more dangerous than themselves, but what they had just encountered was different. This was not a battle they had expected to lose, and yet they had. As their ships began to move farther from the human warship, the calm of space felt unsettling. The usual hum of their ships, the familiar sound of engines powering through space, was drowned out by the silence in the fleet. No one spoke. No one needed to. The faces of the alien commanders were tight with tension. They had not been prepared for what they had just experienced. The fleet commander, a seasoned alien warrior named Zoreth, stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the vast emptiness ahead. His mind raced, replaying the events in his head over and over again. They had arrived expecting a small, weak human settlement with no real means of defense. What they had found instead was a human warship massive, powerful, and unlike anything they had ever seen. The warship seemed alive, pulsing with energy, radiating an aura of power that made even the bravest of them hesitate. Zoreth clenched his fists. The image of that warship still haunted him. Its dark, imposing shape, its sleek design, its terrifying weapon systems. It had been like staring at a force of nature. For the first time in his life, Zoreth had felt fear, the kind of fear that gnawed at his bones and made his heart beat faster. It was the kind of fear a warrior never wanted to feel. And yet, here he was, retreating from an enemy that hadn't even fired a single shot. Why did they not attack us? Zoreth muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible in the quiet of the bridge. His second in command, a younger and more eager officer named Vrex, stepped forward. They were waiting, Vrex replied, waiting for us to make the first move. Zoreth nodded slowly. He knew that Vrex was right. The human warship had made no aggressive move. Instead, it had stood there, massive and silent, as if it was daring them to strike first. It was a trap, and they had fallen into it. Are we sure that ship wasn't just a decoy? Vrex asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Zoreth turned to face him, his expression hardening. It was no decoy, Vrex. That ship was real, and it was alive with power. We've never seen anything like it. It wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon. A weapon capable of wiping out entire fleets in the blink of an eye. The thought of the human warship sent a chill down Zoreth's spine. The ship had not fired a single shot, and yet just its presence had been enough to send them into full retreat. What did that mean? Was humanity truly that powerful? Or had they just been toying with them? A low rumble of conversation filled the bridge as the other commanders exchanged uneasy glances. The entire fleet was on edge. No one was talking about victory anymore. There was no victory to celebrate. They had been caught off guard, outclassed by a species they had once thought weak and insignificant. The humans were no longer the harmless creatures they had once believed them to be. What do we do now? Vrex asked, his voice shaking slightly. Zoreth turned to him, his gaze cold and hard. We learn. We observe. We prepare for the next time. The alien fleet was heading back to their home planet, but the journey back felt like an eternity. The silence that filled the ships was thick with thoughts, fears, and questions. How could they have underestimated humanity so completely? How had they failed to see what the humans had built in secret? Their technology, their warships, their power. It was beyond anything the aliens had imagined. Zoreth's mind wandered back to the moment when they had first seen the human warship. The fleet had been moving through space, looking for new planets to conquer, new species to dominate. When the coordinates had been received, the aliens had expected a small human settlement, a peaceful colony with no defenses. What they found instead was the massive silhouette of the human warship, emerging from behind a moon like a shadow in the night. It had been so much bigger than anything they had anticipated. The warship's design had been sleek and angular, and it had pulsed with energy, a force they could feel even from a distance. The power radiating from it had been undeniable. The alien commanders had expected to see humans as they had always seen them, weak, frail, and helpless. But what they saw instead was a civilization that had mastered the art of war in a way they had never thought possible. The humans were not just a species to be conquered, they were a species that could challenge their very existence. As the fleet neared their home planet, Zorth's thoughts remained focused on the human warship. He knew one thing for sure: humanity was no longer the small, insignificant species they had once believed. That humans were something entirely new. And if the aliens did not adjust their plans, they would soon face a war they were not ready for. "We were wrong," Zorth whispered to himself, staring out at the stars. "Humanity is not a species we can conquer. They are a species we must fear." The realization hit him harder than any blow he had ever taken in battle. The humans had shown them their power. Now it was up to the aliens to decide how to face it. And one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. This part sets the tone for the rest of the story, showing the alien commander's shock and fear after encountering humanity's power. The suspense and realization that humanity is a force to be reckoned with adds tension, setting up for the next chapters of the story. The unexpected response as the alien fleet continued its journey back. The tension in the air only grew thicker. The vast expanse of space, usually a realm of endless possibilities, now felt like a suffocating, empty void. The usual pride and confidence that the alien fleet commanders carried with them had vanished. In its place was a profound sense of vulnerability. The universe no longer felt like it belonged to them. Zorth paced slowly across the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the stars outside the viewport. His mind refused to rest. How had the humans achieved this? How had they built such a warship, one that could stand against an entire fleet without even having to fire a single shot? The aliens had made a grave mistake by underestimating the humans, and now they were left to deal with the consequences. "Commander," Rex's voice interrupted Zorth's thoughts. The younger officer stood at the communications console, a concerned expression on his face. "There's something strange happening. We're receiving a signal from the human warship, but it's not a message." Zorth's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, not a message?" Vrex hesitated before pressing a button. A low hum filled the bridge, followed by a faint, irregular pulse of energy. It was not like any transmission the aliens had ever encountered. It was raw, unfiltered power and energy that resonated deep within the ship's sensors. Almost as if it were a warning, Zorth's instincts flared. He could feel the vibration through the floor beneath him, a strange hum that seemed to match the pulse of the signal. There was no doubt in his mind that the human warship was somehow sending this energy directly to them. Vrex's fingers
What is
flew
this?
over the controls. Zorth muttered, his voice low.
The transmission.
It's not a language, sir. It's more like a force, an energy field. The closer we get to it, the stronger it becomes." Zorth's gaze hardened. "So they are not finished with us yet?" "Not even close," Vrex replied, voice tinged with awe. For the next few minutes, the bridge fell into a tense silence, the crew members watching as the strange pulse continued to increase in strength. The alien fleet had already left the vicinity of the human warship, but this energy seemed to be reaching out, following them, haunting them. Suddenly, the pulse intensified, and the entire fleet lurched forward, as though caught in an invisible gravitational pull. Zorth gripped the edge of the command chair, as the ships shook under the force. The strange hum now felt like it was vibrating through their very bones. "What is happening?" Vrex shouted, his voice filled with panic. The entire crew could feel the pressure building, the overwhelming sensation of being trapped by an unseen force. They had been prepared for combat, for attack, but nothing had prepared them for this. Zorath stood rigid, his mind racing. Was this the human warship's final move? Had they activated some kind of weapon that could reach them even at this distance? "Activate shields," Zorath ordered, trying to regain control. But his voice, normally calm and confident, now sounded strained. He knew the shields would not hold against something like this. Just as quickly as the pressure had built, it abruptly stopped. The alien fleet was released from the grip of the strange force. The ships lurched back like a sudden release of tension, and the hum died down. There was a moment of complete silence. No pulse, no pressure, just the vast, quiet emptiness of space. Zorath stood motionless, his breath heavy. The crew on the bridge exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what had just happened. The pulse had come from the human warship. But it was not an attack, not a weapon. It was something else entirely, something far more unnerving. "Commander," Vrex said slowly, his voice filled with dread. "They're sending us a message, but not with words. Not with anything we can understand." Zorath's mind raced. He had experienced many forms of communication, from peaceful gestures to threats and battle cries. But this was different. The humans were sending a message through raw energy, something far more primal and powerful than mere words. "Is it a warning?" Zorath asked, his voice low, but full of curiosity. He felt an odd sense of dread growing inside him. "I don't know," Vrex replied, still processing what had just happened. "But it feels like a challenge. They are showing us their power. Not through weapons, not through force, but through something deeper. Something we can't control." Zorath's gaze hardened. The realization hit him like a wave. The human warship had not needed to attack. They hadn't needed to fire a single shot. The message was clear. The humans were showing them that they were not afraid. They were confident, and they had the power to back it up. They had shown the aliens that they were not just a species to be feared. They were a species that could change the rules of the galaxy. "Prepare for an immediate change in strategy," Zorath ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We will return to the council and report our findings. This is something we must prepare for." As the fleet continued its journey back home, Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The humans were not like anything they had encountered before. The alien commanders had underestimated them, and now they had learned the true meaning of that mistake. The human warship, with its silent power and unspoken threat, had done something far more dangerous than any weapon. It had instilled fear. Fear was the most dangerous weapon of all. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. This part delves deeper into the strange, powerful communication from the human warship, keeping the aliens on edge and unsure of the humans' true capabilities. The mystery and tension continue to build, ensuring that the audience stays hooked, wondering what will happen next. The calm before the storm. The alien fleet, still shaken from their encounter with the human warship, continued its journey through a vastness of space. However, the atmosphere within the fleet had shifted. Gone was the arrogance that usually defined the fleet commanders and officers. In its place was an undercurrent of uncertainty. Their confidence had been broken by an enemy they had yet to understand fully. Zorath stood at the front of the command bridge, staring out into the endless expanse of stars. His mind was consumed with the events of the past hours. It was not the overwhelming size or advanced weaponry of the human warship that troubled him. It was something far more unsettling, something far more insidious. The energy pulse they had received had been unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just raw power, it was alive. It resonated with something deeper, something ancient. Zorath could feel it deep in his bones, and it unnerved him in a way that no weapon or fleet ever had. "Commander, we're approaching the rendezvous point." Rex's voice cut through his thoughts. The younger officer stood by the communication panel, a mixture of anticipation and concern in his expression. Zorath turned, his sharp gaze meeting Rex's. "Understood. Begin preparations for the report to the High Council." The alien fleet had been tasked with assessing the human threat, and now they were returning to their home planet to report their findings. But as Zorath prepared himself for the council meeting, something gnawed at him. There was a nagging feeling that they were missing something critical about humanity's power that they had yet to uncover. The journey to the home planet felt like an eternity, and the silence in the fleet seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Zorath could sense that his officers, too, were lost in their own thoughts, haunted by the power they had encountered. The human warship had not fired a single shot, yet it had managed to paralyze them with fear and uncertainty. "Zorath, do you think the High Council will believe our report?" Rex's voice broke the silence again, more vulnerable than before. Zorath glanced at the young officer, seeing the hesitation in his eyes. Rex had never known fear like this. His entire career had been built on the premise of invincibility. The alien fleet had always been the hunters, not the hunted. "I don't know," Zorath replied truthfully, "but they will have to." What we faced out there was not just a threat. It was a message, a warning. Before Rex could respond, the communication panel beeped. A signal was coming through. Zorath's heart skipped a beat. The transmission was faint, but unmistakable. It was from the human warship. "Put it through," Zorath ordered, his voice taut with anticipation. The screen flickered to life, and a figure appeared on the view screen. It was a human, his face obscured by shadows, his eyes cold and calculating. There was no sign of warmth or friendliness in his expression, just a stern, unwavering gaze. "This is Captain Erickson of the United Earth Fleet," the human said, his voice strong and direct. "I trust you've received our message." Zorath stood still, his heart pounding. He had expected communication, but not like this, not so soon. And certainly not with this level of calm, as though the humans already knew everything about their fleet's movements. "We've received it," Zorath replied, trying to maintain his composure. "But what we don't understand is why." "Why? Did you show us your power? Why not simply destroy us?" The human captain's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Destruction is too simple, Zorath. It's easy. The real challenge is to make you understand. You need to know what you're up against before you can even begin to consider how to fight it." Zorath's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly are we up against?" Captain Erickson's smile grew, but his eyes remained cold. "You're up against something far older than you can imagine. Something that doesn't just want to conquer something, that wants to reshape the universe itself. Humanity is not here to be your enemy, Zorath. But if you continue down this path, you will be." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zorath with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. The human's words echoed in his mind. Something older than you can imagine. What did that mean? And why did it feel like the humans were holding something back? The fleet commander turned to face Rex, who was now staring at the blank screen, his expression reflecting the same unease. "Did you hear that?" Zorath asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rex nodded slowly. "Yes, something older. Something beyond us. It's as if we've stumbled into a battle much larger than we realized." Zorath rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of the conversation settling on his shoulders. The human captain had been calm, controlled, as if he already knew how this encounter would play out. Zoreth felt a creeping suspicion that the humans were not just technologically advanced, they were aware of something the aliens hadn't even considered. "Prepare for the council," Zoreth ordered, his voice sharp with newfound resolve. "We must share everything we've learned. They need to understand that this is no ordinary conflict. Humanity is not the threat we thought it was. They are something much more dangerous." As the fleet neared their home planet, Zoreth found himself torn. The encounter with the human warship had revealed only a small fraction of their power. But what lay beneath that surface? What was the true nature of humanity's strength? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning? Zoreth knew one thing for sure. The war with humanity had only just begun. But it wouldn't be fought with weapons or fleets. No, the battle would be for something far more profound. Something that neither side could control. The High Council would need to be prepared. And Zoreth had a feeling that nothing could prepare them for the storm that was coming. This part deepens the mystery, showing that the humans are not just technologically advanced, but also seem to possess knowledge and power that goes beyond the aliens' comprehension. The encounter with Captain Erickson adds an eerie calmness to the human strategy, leaving the aliens uncertain and uneasy. The tension builds as Zoreth and his crew prepare for the revelations ahead, knowing that their understanding of the universe is about to be shaken. The veil lifts. The alien fleet arrived back at their home planet under a blanket of anxious silence. Their ships glided through the cold, star-filled void, yet the familiarity of their home world did nothing to calm the nervous tension that gripped the fleet. Zoreth couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous was lurking beneath the surface of their encounter with humanity. It wasn't just the size of the human warship or the raw power they had sensed. It was the unsettling confidence of their human adversary, Captain Erickson. The meeting with the High Council had been scheduled immediately. Zoreth's reports were ready, but he knew that nothing could truly prepare the Council for what they were about to hear. No amount of data or analysis could capture the true depth of the threat humanity posed. The human warship had sent a message, not just through its overwhelming power, but through its calculated restraint. The pulse they had felt was not simply a weapon, it was a symbol, a warning. Zoreth stepped into the grand chamber of the High Council, his heart heavy with the weight of the information he was about to deliver. The room, as always, was filled with the sound of hushed whispers, the voices of leaders from various alien species all around the galaxy. They were all waiting for the latest intelligence about the human race, the same intelligence Zoreth had brought to the forefront. At the center of the chamber stood the High Council, a collective of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, each representing a different species. Zoreth stood at the forefront, his gaze unwavering as the Council's leader. An ancient being, named Thraxos, spoke. "Zoreth, report," Thraxos commanded, his voice like thunder in the silent room. The air felt charged with anticipation as Zoreth stepped forward. He had been to this chamber many times before, delivering reports on countless encounters, but this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just presenting information. He was presenting a reality that no one was prepared to face. "Council members, I returned from our mission to evaluate the human threat," Zoreth began, his voice steady but laced with a hint of urgency. "And what I have seen has shaken everything we thought we knew about this galaxy." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The murmurs of the council members faded into silence. "The human race," Zoreth continued, his eyes scanning the faces of the council, "is unlike anything we have encountered before. They are not merely a species to be conquered. They are a force of nature. Their power is not just technological, it is conceptual. Their warships, their weapons, their presence, it is all designed not just for destruction, but for control. They have a deep understanding of the galaxy that goes far beyond any of us." The council remained silent, their eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to elaborate. "Zorath," Thraxos interjected, his voice cutting through the tension. "You speak of power, but this is not the first time we have encountered a strong species. What makes these humans so different? We have faced species far more advanced than they. What makes them a threat?" Zorath's eyes narrowed. "It's not just their ships, Thraxos. It's their way of thinking. The message they sent to us. Energy pulse, not a weapon, but a force. It wasn't simply a message. It was a warning, a challenge. The humans have mastered the ability to control not just their technology, but the very fabric of the universe itself." A collective gasp rippled through the council. The weight of Zorath's words hit like a sudden storm. "They manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe with ease," Zorath continued, his tone low but urgent. "They know things secrets about the cosmos that we have only begun to scratch the surface of. That energy pulse? It wasn't just a display of strength, it was a test. A way for them to show us their control over the very nature of reality." The room was now filled with hushed whispers. The council members exchanged nervous glances, and Zorath could see that his words were sinking in. He had never seen the High Council so visibly shaken. "What are you saying, Zorath?" Thraxos asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I'm saying," Zorath replied, "that the humans are not just a species of fighters. They are manipulators of the very forces that govern the universe. Their warship wasn't just a ship. It was a conduit for a force we cannot comprehend." Another council member, a slender being from the Andori species, spoke up. "Are you suggesting that the humans control gravity, or energy, or even time itself?" Zorath nodded slowly. "Something like that. I don't know exactly how, but they've tapped into powers beyond our understanding. And if they decide to use them against us, we will be helpless. The warship we encountered, it didn't even need to fire a single shot to show us that. They simply used the energy around them to make us feel powerless." A low murmur spread through the council. It was clear that no one had expected this. The idea that humanity might possess this level of mastery over the fundamental laws of the universe was unthinkable. Thraxos rose from his seat, his face a mask of grim determination. "So, we are faced with a species that doesn't just wield weapons, but the very fabric of reality itself." Zorath met his gaze, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Yes, and I fear that if we do not understand them, we will find ourselves powerless in the face of their might." The chamber fell into silence as the High Council digested this new, terrifying information. Zorath could feel the eyes of every leader upon him, but his mind was far from the council's deliberations. He couldn't stop thinking about the human message, the pulse of energy, the calm yet chilling confidence of Captain Erickson. The humans were playing a game far bigger than anyone had imagined. And if they didn't learn the rules quickly, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the council began to discuss their next steps, Zorath found himself questioning everything he had once believed. They had encountered countless powerful species before, but none had manipulated the very laws of existence itself. The humans weren't just a threat, they were an entirely new kind of power, one that, for the first time, made Zorath feel utterly small. This part explores the full extent of humanity's power, revealing that their technological might is tied to a deeper understanding of the universe itself. The High Council, usually confident and unshakable, is now forced to confront an entirely new kind of threat, one that goes beyond anything they had anticipated. Zorath's realization that humanity controls more than just weapons, but the very fabric of reality itself adds an overwhelming layer of mystery and dread to the story, leaving the council and the audience with a sense of unease and anticipation. The unseen hand, as the High Council convened in the wake of Zorath's unsettling revelations, an air of urgency and dread spread throughout the chamber. The council members, previously confident in their ability to handle any threat, now faced a dilemma unlike any they had encountered before. Humanity, a species they had once deemed insignificant, had proven themselves capable of powers that bent the very laws of the universe. And now, the galaxy was on the brink of an entirely new kind of conflict, a conflict that could change the fabric of existence itself. Zorath stood on the periphery, watching as the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species debated what to do next. His mind was still reeling from the transmission with Captain Erickson, the cold, calculated words that haunted him even now. Humanity had shown no fear, no hesitation in asserting their dominance. They hadn't just warned the alien fleet, they had revealed the truth in a way that left no room for doubt. The humans were not merely players in the galaxy. They were a force unto themselves, an unseen hand that had been shaping the universe in ways the aliens could not yet understand. Zorath, Thraxus's voice cut through the chatter of the council. You've told us that humanity controls the very forces of the universe. But we need more than just this theory. We need proof. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Zorath's gaze shifted toward Thraxus. The ancient leader's face was stern. His eyes narrowed in thought. There was no room for uncertainty in the High Council. But what Zorath had brought back could not be explained with the usual calculations or strategies. There was no framework in which to place humanity's abilities. I don't have all the answers, Thraxos, Zorath replied, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. But what I do know is this. The energy pulse we felt, it wasn't just a weapon. It was a declaration, a signal to us that we are not in control anymore. Another council member, a sharp-minded being from the Thrix species, leaned forward, her silver eyes gleaming with curiosity. So you believe they have mastered some kind of energy manipulation? That they can bend space itself to their will? Zorath nodded grimly. It's more than that. It's as if the very rules of the universe bend when they choose. That pulse, it wasn't just raw energy, it was something far more subtle. They know the fabric of space-time. And when Captain Erickson spoke to us, it felt like he was aware of us long before we even arrived in their space. Preemptive awareness, muttered another council member, a bulky reptilian creature from the Felvash species. You're suggesting they have foresight, or some form of control over time? Zorath paused, considering the weight of that possibility. Could the humans truly control time, or merely perceive it differently? He didn't know for certain. What he did know was that their presence alone had created an unshakable sense of unease among them all. The human warship wasn't just a tool, Zorath said, his voice tightening. It was a message of restraint. They could have destroyed, used easily. But instead, they showed us their power without lifting a finger. They wanted us to feel the weight of their will, not their weapons. Thraxus's eyes glinted with a sharp, calculating look. If they wanted us to fear them, they succeeded. But fear alone doesn't win battles. Knowledge does. Zorath's heart sank. The Council's fixation on knowledge was understandable, but the humans weren't offering answers. They were offering an experience, a glimpse into something far beyond the Council's reach. Knowledge alone might not prepare them for what was coming. We cannot rely on mere knowledge. Zorath replied, his voice firm. What the humans did to us wasn't just a demonstration. They're playing a different game, one we don't understand, and one that we need to learn now before we're consumed by it. There was a long, uneasy silence. The council members exchanged looks, but no one spoke. The weight of Zorath's words hung in the air, a heavy fog of uncertainty that suffocated their usual confident posturing. Thraxos finally broke the silence. Then we must approach this problem differently. We cannot face humanity head-on with brute force alone. What we need is a deeper understanding, an understanding of how they've tapped into these forces, We need to find out how they do it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Zorath's eyes flickered with a thought. There was something he hadn't shared with the council yet, a piece of the puzzle that still troubled him deeply. Something that had been lingering at the edges of his mind ever since that moment on the battlefield with the human warship. He stepped forward, addressing the council in a quieter, more deliberate tone. "There's one more thing," Zorath said. "When I was close to the human warship, I felt something strange, something beyond the ship itself. It was like the very fabric of space around it shifted when they were near. Not just energy, but consciousness." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The idea that the humans had the ability to manipulate not just physical forces, but the very consciousness of those around them, was something none of them had considered. "Are you suggesting," the Thrix council member asked, her voice low, with suspicion, "that humanity has developed a form of telepathic manipulation? Or that their presence alters our minds in some way?" Zorath nodded. "I don't know what it is, but there's something about the human way of thinking, something subtle and powerful, that changes everything around them. It's not just their ships, it's their will." Thraxos leaned back, deep in thought. The council was now silent, each member processing what Zorath had said. The High Council, who had once prided themselves on their ability to dominate the galaxy, were now forced to confront the chilling possibility that they had underestimated. Humanity on a scale they couldn't comprehend. "We will need to approach this with extreme caution," Thraxos said, his voice hardening. "It seems we are no longer the hunters. The humans have turned the tables, and it is they who are watching us now." Zorath felt the weight of those words like a crushing blow. The alien fleets, once the dominant force in the galaxy, now found themselves staring into the unknown, a force they couldn't defeat with weapons or strategy. They were facing something older, something that transcended even their own understanding of existence. The battle with humanity had already begun, but this was not a battle of strength or technology. It was a battle of wills, of understanding the unseen forces that governed everything in the universe. And the aliens had no idea how to win that fight. In this part, the High Council realizes that they are not just dealing with powerful technology, but something far more profound. The concept of humanity wielding an unseen, almost metaphysical power over reality itself begins to take shape. The Council, once confident in their dominance, is now gripped with uncertainty. Zorath's revelation that the humans may possess the ability to alter consciousness adds another layer of complexity, making it clear that the galaxy is entering a new and unpredictable era. The veil tears, the High Council sat in a rare silence, the gravity of the situation pressing on every mind in the room. The vast expanse of the galaxy, which had always seemed so full of possibilities, now felt like a trap. Every moment, every decision was suddenly fraught with danger. Zorath's words about humanity's control over the very essence of space, time, and consciousness had unsettled everyone present. For the first time in centuries, the Council was not united by their usual confidence, but divided by fear of the unknown. This was no longer a typical encounter with a new species. It was something far more dangerous. Humanity, a species once thought to be of no consequence, had shown that they could manipulate forces that defied all understanding. Zorath's eyes swept across the chamber, taking in the Council's growing uncertainty. The ancient alien races that had once been the undisputed masters of the galaxy now faced a force they couldn't comprehend. And what was even more troubling, they had no way of predicting how far humanity's reach extended. Finally, Thraxos, the leader of the Council, broke the silence. "We have underestimated them," Thraxos said, his voice low but carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "And now we must decide what we are going to do about it. It seems the galaxy has shifted, and we are no longer the ones who pull the strings." Zorath stood tall, his mind racing with the implications. What had once been a simple report about the human warship had now spiraled into something far more profound. Humanity was not merely a threat to be defeated. They were a force to be reckoned with, a force that could change the very nature of the galaxy itself. "We need to learn what makes them tick," Zorath said, his voice filled with conviction. "We need to understand how they can manipulate the forces of the universe with such ease. It's not enough to be powerful. We need to know them. Only then can we know if we stand a chance." The council looked at him in silence, as if processing his words. Finally, one of the senior council members, a being from the Vrak species, spoke. "We have a problem," the Vrak leader said, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "We cannot simply approach them like we would any other species. If they are capable of manipulating space and time, how do we even make contact with them? How do we fight an enemy that is beyond the normal laws of reality?" Zorath nodded gravely. The question had been weighing heavily on his own mind. They had no idea what kind of weapon they could use against the humans, especially if the warship wasn't the limit of their capabilities. "We don't fight them with weapons," Zorath said, his voice quiet but firm. "We fight them with knowledge. We need to understand the mechanism of their power. We need to find a way to get inside their minds, to see through their eyes. They've already shown us that they are far beyond our reach in terms of physical power. But if we can understand how they think, maybe then we can outmaneuver them." A tense murmur swept across the council members. The thought of engaging humanity not with brute force, but with intellect, was unsettling. The High Council had always been the apex of power in the galaxy, but now they were being forced to reconsider everything they knew. "What you're suggesting," said Thraxos, his voice thick with skepticism, "is that we should negotiate with them? Learn from them?" Zorath met Thraxos's gaze, his own expression unwavering. "Yes, but not just any negotiation. We need to learn how they shape reality, how they bend the laws of the universe. If we can understand that, we might just be able to find a way to counter them, or at the very least, avoid direct confrontation." A silence hung in the air as the council members pondered Zorath's proposal. It was radical, perhaps even foolish. But in this moment, with everything they had once known thrown into chaos, it was the only option they had left. Thraxos finally spoke, his voice filled with a grim resolution. "I will authorize a new mission. Zorath, you will lead an expedition to the humans. You will seek out the answers we need, no matter what it takes. And if they do not comply, you are authorized to act on behalf of the council." Zorath felt a surge of both dread and determination. He was being entrusted with the future of the galaxy, a weight that could easily crush him. But there was no other choice. He had seen the power the humans wielded, and now he had to discover the key to understanding it. "We'll need to send more than just a small scouting party," Zorath said. "This is something far beyond our usual reconnaissance missions. We need to infiltrate their inner workings, understand how they control the forces they wield." Thraxos nodded. "Then you shall have all the resources you need. But remember, Zorath, this is a delicate matter. The humans may be more than willing to talk, or they may see this as an act of aggression. Proceed with caution." With that, the council ended the meeting, and Zorath left the chamber, feeling the full weight of the mission ahead of him. The fate of the galaxy now rested on the exploration of an unknown force, a force that had the potential to reshape the very fabric of existence. Asterisk, a new kind of Enemizirith's team gathered in the briefing room, preparing for the most important mission in their entire careers. The task was simple, at least on the surface. Learn everything they could about humanity, their warships, and their ability to manipulate the universe. But nothing about this mission was simple. The more Zorath thought about it, the more he realized that they were stepping into uncharted territory, where even the most advanced technologies and tactics they had could be rendered useless. As his team assembled, Zorath stood before them, looking into each of their faces. He could see the fear in their eyes, though it was carefully hidden beneath their hardened exterior. They had all known battles, strategy, and war. But what they were about to face was something completely different. They were about to confront a force that had no respect for the usual rules of warfare. "Prepare yourselves," Zorath said quietly. "We are about to meet a species unlike any we've ever known. A species that doesn't just manipulate technology, but bends reality itself. And if we don't learn what they know, we will be lost before we even begin." As the team gathered their equipment and began their preparations, Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer just embarking on a mission. They were stepping into the unknown, into a place where the rules of the universe might not even apply. The veil of the galaxy's hidden mysteries had just begun to tear away. And what lay beyond it was far more terrifying than anyone could have anticipated. This part introduces the next phase of the story, where the High Council's decision to understand humanity's power leads Zorath and his team to embark on a critical mission. With the fate of the galaxy at stake, they must navigate a new kind of warfare, one that doesn't rely on physical strength, but on understanding a force far older and more subtle. The stakes are raised even higher, and the unknown becomes even more ominous, as Zorath's team heads straight into the heart of humanity's mysterious power. The shifting sands of reality. Zorath's fleet cut through the endless stretch of space toward the unknown. The journey to humanity's home system felt like an eternity, a stark contrast to the relative speed and precision of the alien fleet. Every passing minute felt like a countdown, not to a battle, but to an encounter that would redefine the galaxy. The mission had shifted. It was no longer about simply gathering intelligence. No, it was about survival. The team assembled in the command room, looking at the holographic map of the human star system. Earth, a planet that had once seemed insignificant, surrounded by a handful of other planets, was now the focal point of their very existence. They had to understand the humans and their control over reality before the humans understood that. The galaxy's most powerful species were knocking on their door. Zorath stood before his team, his expression somber. "We are about to enter human space. I need every one of you to be on edge. We cannot predict what will happen once we arrive. The humans have already demonstrated their ability to manipulate our very perceptions. They know we are coming. They might even be expecting us. And we have no idea what they'll do when they see us." There was a brief, uncomfortable silence as the weight of Zorath's words sank in. Every member of the team understood the gravity of the mission. They had prepared for every kind of battle, every type of adversary. But this was uncharted territory. They didn't know the rules, let alone how to break them. Finally, Vrex, Zorath's trusted second-in-command, spoke up. "Commander, how exactly are we going to handle this? What is our strategy? We know they can bend space and time. What's our first move when we arrive?" Zorath met Vrex's gaze, his eyes steely with resolve. "Our first move will be patience. We need to observe, not just their technology, but how they think. If they can manipulate the very fabric of reality, then their way of thinking is a weapon in itself. We must be prepared to face them not with force, but with understanding. And if they attack?" Vrex pressed, his voice tinged with concern. "Then we'll adapt," Zorath said simply. "We have no other choice." The ship's engines hummed as the fleet finally crossed the threshold into human space. The stars grew dimmer, their cold light swallowed by the dense energy fields surrounding the human system. There was something alive about the space here. The usual empty void of the galaxy felt different. It pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if something unseen was watching them, waiting for them to make their next move. As the fleet moved closer to Earth's orbit, something strange began to happen. The ship's systems began to glitch. The displays flickered erratically, strange symbols flashing on the screens. The familiar hum of the engines became distorted, as though the very fabric of the ship's systems was being twisted. Zoreth's heart raced, but he remained calm. "Prepare for the unexpected," he ordered. A loud crackling noise echoed through the ship, and then for a moment the stars themselves seemed to warp. Space distorted as though it was being stretched and pulled apart. For a brief second, the alien fleet saw what looked like an enormous structure, glowing with a strange light, shifting between dimensions. The image vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but it left a mark on Zoreth's mind, a feeling that the human presence wasn't just on Earth, but was embedded throughout the very fabric of reality. Did anyone else see that? Vrex asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Zoreth didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing. The humans were not just on Earth. They were in Earth. They had integrated themselves with the very forces of the galaxy. "This is no ordinary colony," Zoreth said finally, his voice low with awe. "The humans have somehow merged with the fabric of reality itself." The ship's communications officer suddenly spoke up. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission." Zoreth nodded, motioning for the transmission to be put through. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. It was a human Captain Erickson, but he looked ... different. His appearance was the same, but his eyes, they weren't like before. They were darker, almost as if he could see through the very walls of the ship. His gaze seemed to pierce into the souls of every person in the room. "I see you've made it," Captain Erickson's voice echoed, calm and measured, but there was something unsettling about it, as though the words themselves carried weight beyond their meaning. Zoreth stood still, his mind already working through the countless implications of the human's words. "We've come to understand what you've shown us. The power you wield is not just technological. It's something far more profound. We need to know how you do it." Captain Erickson's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. "You've come to the right place. But what you seek cannot be understood through knowledge alone. It must be experienced. You will see. In time." Zoreth's blood ran cold. He knew that the humans had been hiding something, but this was beyond anything he had anticipated. The captain wasn't just speaking as a soldier. He was speaking as someone who had transcended mere existence. The weight of his words felt like a subtle command, not an invitation. The very fabric of space seemed to tremble at his presence. "Be careful, Zoreth," Captain Erickson continued, his voice laced with something resembling pity. "You've crossed into our domain now. Here the rules of reality are ours to bend. And you will see, soon enough, that once you enter, there's no turning back." With that, the transmission ended, and the eerie silence returned to the command room. Zoreth's heart pounded in his chest. He had been prepared for conflict, for strategy. But this was something else entirely. The humans were not merely defending their territory. They were reshaping reality to their will. "We are no longer fighting for control of the galaxy," Zoreth said, his voice filled with awe and dread. "We are fighting to understand it." The ships continued to move forward, but now every star seemed to pulse in rhythm with the strange energy surrounding them. The very nature of the universe had shifted, and they were standing on the precipice, unable to look away from what lay beyond. Zoreth realized, in that moment, that humanity wasn't just a species that had discovered power. They had become a new kind of force, a force that bent the rules of the universe in ways no one had ever thought possible. And this was only the beginning. This part deepens the mystery, revealing that humanity's influence extends far beyond their warships. They are not simply manipulating technology, but the very fabric of reality itself. Zoreth's encounter with. Captain Erickson highlights the unsettling truth. The humans are no longer bound by the laws of physics as the rest of the galaxy understands them. The rules of space, time, and existence itself are now under the humans' control, and the alien fleet is left to question whether they are ready to face a force that operates beyond comprehension. The galaxy has shifted, and the future is now a terrifying unknown.